Hi, everybody. I'm here with Mark Coscarello, seasoned COO, consultant, and trusted advisor who helps companies scale smarter, not just faster. With deep expertise in funding, operations, technology, and people strategy, he's guided startups and Fortune 1000s through rapid growth, M&A, and digital transformation, saving millions in costs while unlocking new revenue streams. And whether it's building resilient teams, streamlining process, or securing the right capital, Mark's focus is always on turning chaos into scalable, sustainable success. His trademark approach of transparency, integrity, authenticity has earned him a reputation of the go-to problem solver and pioneer driver for leaders who want to grow with confidence. Thanks you, Mark, for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, John, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
This
I
is awesome.
appreciate you joining us. And, we were talking a little bit about just how crazy the market has been from a talent side of things, because obviously there's a lot of unemployed now. It's over 4%. A lot of executives now are seeing job search lasting 6 to 9 to even to a year.
Yeah.
And I think you've had some experience with that as well, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been times where I've been out for 3 months and that was the longest. And even now it's been over a year for certain projects and everything else. And you figure, oh, I can pick up a consulting gig or something like that. Not so easy anymore. The market is unfortunately about checking boxes nowadays through a broken process. And that's why it's really great to connect with smaller boutique, exec search firms like yourself. So they care more about the customer and the client as both, not just getting that revenue from the client perspective of it. So that's where I've targeted, my searching for a while, and leaning into that fortitude for this market that we're facing, and just making great relationships and staying top of mind for a lot of different folks.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And from our standpoints, we view every potential interaction as a long-term business relationship, right?
Sure. Yep.
And for executives in our network, you can either be placing them in a position or continue to work with them, even helping them potentially hire when they finally do land a role and want to build their team. So it's like, it's in everybody's interest to have not burn your bridges, right? And so
Yeah.
I think you've seen some experience with that too, where there's just some bad hiring practices that have been out there. A lot of ghosting, a lot of things that are really leave a sour taste in people's mouths when they're looking for jobs, right? And
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of thing to go through.
Yeah, and I think it's all over the place now. A quick story too, John. There was a portfolio company of a PE firm that I had interviewed with. I actually knew one of the folks from a previous executive kind of in transition group, and this person had gotten an opportunity, connected with me still throughout, actually helped them write the job description for a role that they needed. And it was like, hey, Mark, I think you're a great fit for this opportunity. You'd be fantastic for this, head of operations role. And I said, sure, let's do that. Wrote the job description with them. They'd connected for at least 7 to 9 months after they got the role. Then they finally got budget. I went through 7 interviews with this company, and then at the end, I thought it was just a formality. Let's interview, let's check the boxes, and and they're like, "Oh, sorry, we went with someone else." And I was like shocked. I was like, "How? What do you mean? We wrote the job description together. We went over everything, connected at least 3 or 4 different times, almost every other month during this." And you're consistently saying we need a leader and a successor after I move on in a year or two after this. And then they went with somebody else. They really didn't have a good reason other than budget, and I think they were scared. Obviously, unfortunately, they were probably threatened after they thought about it, and that's the way it went. But they burned a bridge with me. I didn't burn the bridge with them. I was very cordial and professional, but it was very shocking. But that's what's going on out there. And there's other people that have told me terrible stories about just, bad hiring practices. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, once you starting to get into the 5, 6, 7 interview stage, it also kind of shows there's a risk aversion to hiring, and they're not really sure what they want, or they're sort of buying for time. I mean, usually the outcome is not that great. So I totally can relate to
Yeah.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something, John, that I get into operationally with a lot of companies. I say, it's built upon trust, right? If you trust your process, you trust your employees, you delegate that authority to other people. Why does the CEO have to have the final say of this? That shows no trust. And you mentioned it earlier. My framework and ethos is transparency, integrity, and authenticity, which builds trust. And that's how I work with my clients now. I'm pretty open and forthright about the transparency and what needs to happen in their business in order for them to get out of that operator mode and either get into the executive level mode or that entrepreneurial mode or that builder, or saying I'm a leader. Well, are you? If you're holding on to everything, you're not really showing leadership. You need to create other leaders and showing them that trust to make hires, to make key hires. That is building other leaders.
It's hard for some CEOs to do that when they're sort of the owner operator for many years, and they're used to it being
Sure.
like their baby, and
Yep.
being able to feel comfortable enough to actually like let go the strings a little bit. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
just that alone is a process in itself, I guess.
It
And
is.
we've seen it with some of our hires. We place a C-level executive, and you're like, okay, now you're handling hiring. No, no, well, sort of, or I got to run it
Right.
by the boss. Like
Right.
it can get pretty crazy. I mean, that also creates, besides stress for everybody. I mean, there's a lack of trust, and people can feel it right throughout the whole
They can.
organization, that there's that big brother kind of attitude and monitoring. And I've seen this especially with remote teams. Right, when we had remote teams,
Yeah.
a lot of managers didn't know how to manage because their people were now remote. And that's why you're seeing such a big pushback to get people back to the office, because they never learned the skills of how to
Yeah.
manage and work with a remote team. So what's been your experience with that? Like, between hybrid, remote, and on site, like from
Yeah.
an operations standpoint.
Yeah. That it's a huge disconnect, I think, even currently, where Gartner, I think it was Gartner, had put out a study that 70% of the labor market is disenfranchised or not happy with their employer right now. And that goes to, a 3P kind of framework that I use, which is purpose, potential, and play. And in that environment, you have to have a purpose. The CEO and the leadership has to communicate that to, the folks that are doing the work every day, that are the individual contributors, and then they have to see that potential, and that potential falls into their other play of where they can progress in that company. And if they're not having fun in that company, and that goes to the hybrid and the remote model. A lot of people nowadays, post COVID, I was working remotely in 2010. I was remote. There was no office. It was 3 years of working remotely. And I was like, this is awesome, before, that was a thing. And it was just the transparency. You needed to communicate more, and you needed to trust your team. I had a team. I director trusted me to do different things, and that really permeates through the fabric of a company. And so, to your point, calling people back to the office, I think those people are just holding on until they can find something else. And this is where operations, for me, you don't get the productivity out of a person that is disconnected with your purpose and everything else, with your product and your service. So your customers feel that they're just very transactional. There's no meaning behind their interactions with customers. And that's where your product and service kind of loses luster, and they'll go to somebody else. So customer acquisition, it's much easier to keep a customer than it is, and it's less expensive to keep them than it is to gain new ones.
Oh, for
So
sure.
how do you work on that, right? And that's where you have to be kind of a nonlinear thinker in a CEO chair, of saying, hell, I can see the connection between my customers coming back and the way the employees are treated, they're felt, and the fabric of giving them autonomy in their role to either work from anywhere or the hybrid and work from home model. So I think it could be a very big detriment to a lot of companies.
So how do you manage, like, so, obviously we want to be able to allow autonomy and all those things, but what kind of processes do you put in place in order to be able to do that? Like, there's got to be some KPI and accountability, right? Because
Yeah. Yep.
it's not just willy-nilly, okay, you guys can work for, I trust you, it's fine.
No.
There's got
No.
to be a structure you got to put in place to be able to hold people accountable regardless.
For sure.
It may be changing of management style a little bit. right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's an agile methodology, right? I think this is a saying that people say the only thing constant is change, right? The only thing continually changing is change. And that's going to happen. And I think a lot of folks have grown comfortable in, the office mentality of we can only function everyone in an office when we're face to face. That's not true at all. The startup that I was with several years ago from 2021 to 2022, I didn't meet my boss, who was the chief people officer and the chief operations officer at that company, until 9 months into my tenure, and we worked remotely. One was in Texas, the other was in California. I'm based out of New Jersey. So we connected and we had dashboards, right? We had a back office that spit out dashboards, and we also had the tools and the technology for performance management. And we put in those KPIs of how many touch points with customers you need to have, right? On a sales team, marketing, like let me look at your metrics and see who our engagement is with our marketing strategy and our socials and everything else. Let's see about our talent. How is our talent communicating with us, right? For our recruiting strategies. And then once we get them on board, how do people feel empowered and enabled? Do we have the right tools? So I implemented a number of different tools when I got on board, probably a whole tech stack of 3 or 4 different tools with the help of my team, right? And other people. But we were able to save $8 million year over year by implementing those tools from an operations standpoint and building trust throughout that organization.
Is that like HRIS system like Workday and whatnot? Or are you talking
Yeah.
about?
No, it wasn't Workday. We actually had Bamboo, and then we were switching over to UKG. We had one applicant tracking system that we were using, and then we implemented Greenhouse. We were actually implementing Lattice as well as a performance management tool. Another one is 15.5 that you could look into. We looked into those. We actually implemented another learning and development tool that was Lessonly. So everyone learned on the same platform from certain areas, whether it was out in the field operations or it was in corporate. And we rolled out those learning and development tools for people, created those different content sessions, and everyone went through them. We trained our managers, directors, VPs, and above all went through very similar training through Lessonly. And so we created that content for them, and they went through how to hire, how to implement, how to interview, what we built out interview guides for them. So we didn't get 6 or 7 deep, and we allowed the CEO and the leadership team autonomy to say, this is a director position. We can leave it to the VP. The CEO doesn't meet that person. I trusted my team to go and do that. They interviewed and they passed it up through. There was probably 3, 4 interviews tops, and then we made a hiring decision.
It's really good. And I'm assuming you also had the same thing for onboarding with the L&D platform. You had like a
Yes.
systemized onboarding for everybody.
We did. Yep. So we integrated a tool called Sora through Greenhouse, and they went back and forth through APIs, and it was really, really done well. Real life story. My wife just took on some part-time work through a consulting agency. She's in a totally different field. She's in the medical field. She's a speech pathologist, actually. So even on that realm, we went through the onboarding. She was lost. She was so frustrated that if I weren't her husband, she would have quit by now from an onboarding perspective. And the onboarding was done by Bullhorn. So it was just they needed everything done. She's like, I don't have this information, like just crazy stuff that they needed. And they were just checking boxes. And she's like, wow, this is way overstimulating and overloading for, a few hours a week that I need to be onboarded with the agency. So it's really interesting, but it can be better streamlined. Me being an operations person, I'm kind of poking holes as I go and saying, "Hey, we could do this a little bit better, Bullhorn. We need to get some programmers on this and connect it differently for a user experience."
Yeah, I mean, not every user is the same, and having a blanket kind of thing can be
Yeah,
cumbersome, especially if you're like a part timer or something, and they're asking you to
yeah,
do like all these e-learning modules, and you're like, this is for full time employment.
yeah. I think there was 17 different tasks that she needed to complete on onboarding, and I'm going, wow. Like that's overwhelming for a lot of people. 17 different tasks. So
And of
anyway,
course, it's
yeah,
unpaid time usually, right? They want you to
yeah,
set up
oh
an
yeah.
unpaid time, and yeah,
Yeah, her hours are typically direct billing hours. So she's working with clients direct, so she doesn't get paid for indirect billing. So she's like, "Wait, this is taking like 3 hours to onboard. Like this is crazy."
yeah. No, that's I can totally understand the frustration with that. So
Yeah,
how now that, I mean, there's obviously this whole thing with bringing in new technology and like the what's the real ROI on it, right? How do you feel about
yeah,
this new AI craze that's going on? It seems like there's, hundreds of both custom built tech and then off the shelf, but
yeah.
there's just so much of it now coming in. Like, how are you integrating that into your operations stack when you're going into
Yeah.
companies and so on?
That's a great question, John, and it is constant reiteration of what we need in operations. There's a ton of different tools for business development AI. There's a ton of different tools for your sales and business development, and then operations. How are we doing that? How are we empowering people to do their jobs better, faster, stronger for our customers? And even with my clients, technology and even digital marketing has just taken such this massive role of overstimulating. Hey, I have a bespoke AI solution for you. And it's like just constant digital marketing about that. What's good? What's not? So I think we have to stick to some of the mainstream ones out there, like Gemini and Copilot and ChatGPT. I'm a big fan of Claude AI. I'm a big fan of Perplexity. And then those are the tech stacks that I use is Claude, Perplexity, and then I also use Napkin for illustrations and pictures and things like that because we're all different learners from a visual perspective. So I use some of those. I know a lot of people are on the Microsoft suite, and I said, hey, go use Copilot, go use what you need, but don't only use that one. I would spit it out into your thoughts and your perspectives into some other AI tools and compare them, right? I would not take AI at face value yet for what it's worth, but me personally, I'm working with 2 or 3 different AI companies right now. One is a client in a logistics and supply chain where they fulfill logistics and supply chain automation through AI. So you don't have to rely on your demand planning. It's connected to your technology and it does it automatically. So orders go in, come out, logistics, supply chain, and everything else. So really interesting tool for someone in that specific area. Then another person I'm working with has a AI towards agriculture and farming and everything else. So you'd never think of, well, farming, gosh, how do we make that more efficient and effective from a technology? Well, farming is still the same kind of here in this little box area. This is when we plant. This is when now with a lot of different technologies, hydroponic kind of technologies and that kind of agriculture and everything else. How are we not eroding our soil? And this is kind of someone who's been in agriculture for years. And he's developed an AI tool to really assist farmers to do it better, faster, and stronger in that area. So it's what we need. I would definitely go out and seek those types of opportunities from AI and build that into our tech stack, depending on what vertical and what service we have for our product. What are we offering out there in the market? So there's a lot of different solutions, and I would just be careful how we're going to implement those and
So
where it's going.
maybe a question about that is when you are thinking about implementing a new, let's say, experimental tech, we'll call it experimental because it's
Yeah.
fairly new.
Yeah.
If you're trying to bring in a new experimental tech into the company, I mean, are you doing like A/B testing? You're doing some small batch pilot projects, like before you go all in on a sub. If you want the enterprise subs or 5, 10,000 or whatever. How are you testing out new things? Because it seems like, I'll give you a perfect example. I was starting off. I tried Otter for
Uh-huh.
my note taking, but
Sure.
then
Yep.
within a month there was like Fathom and Fireflies and
Firefly. Sure. Yep.
Read, and there's like 10 other ones, and I started trying the other ones, like, oh, those are better. And it's like you're literally a squirrel chasing a shiny ball around
True.
because there's always
Yep.
something better coming out or new features are being released. So
Yeah.
how do you pivot and manage sort of the whole change management related to that? Because it's like it's moving so fast. We can't keep up with the amount of new stuff that's coming out.
It is. And this is where a lot of folks get into analysis paralysis, right? We're like, oh my gosh, the new shiny object. I'll just wait till the best thing comes out and then I'll do it. That is really not growth. That is not a growth mentality. That is like a dopamine chase, right? We are just chasing the next best thing, or we're waiting. And I think a lot of industries now have been waiting until the best thing. PE firms holding billions of dollars to wait till invest. Same with VCs. It's not 2020 anymore. They're very stringent about what type of companies they're investing in, which AI is a ton which they're investing in because they see the short term and the long term gain, but don't chase the shiny object. It's constant reiteration and ideation of what we want to get to, and we're building it as we go. Right. So I think that's the challenge for a lot of people, but feeding that energy that is the next shiny object can get very exhausting because it's very overstimulating, John, and there's so much out there. So for me as an operator, I look at specific tools and technologies that help our business and my clients move forward, right? From where they're at. I want to meet them where they're at and then build that ecosystem, build that technology tech stack for them, and put in those kind of different guardrails for them to say not get distracted by the focal point, right? And I think at the end of the day, everyone has a service or a product that they're selling and they have value for that. But our commodity that we cannot trade is time. Dan Martell is a huge proponent of trading back your time. He wrote a book on how do we get back our time, pretty much, and looking at how executives and other folks in the C-suite, how do we get back time from doing it? And that's where AI can assist us. And that's where we need to lean into it a lot more and not get distracted from the shiny object, but how do we get back our time and manage our time wisely so we're getting the value and the fulfillment out of using those tools for us, right? Not be a slave to the tools and going after them, but using the tools to benefit us to get back our time so we can really use it effectively.
Yeah, it's funny because there's also there is also a time aspect of learning the tool, being able to implement the tool, seeing the ROI on the tool and
Yeah,
testing it and all that, right? So
there is. Yep.
too much of that can really it's like the savings you had from picking one, you lost in spending 6 months deciding what you wanted to do and implementing
Yeah.
it and then testing it and finding it didn't work. And then, so I totally get the iteration part of it of like, you know, focus on the key KPI of the business and also your time that you're associating with all this because you're never
Yeah.
getting that back. I
Yep.
get that.
And then the other thing too, John, to think of is data privacy, security, infrastructure as well. I have someone that I do advisory work for. It's an AI cybersecurity company. And, with AI over the past year and a half, 2 years, it's really changed security and protocols. So 80% of people in companies right now, I saw a stat last week, I can't remember where it was from, but they said 80% of people are using AI in everyday decisions. And when you put that information into ChatGPT, it goes out into the universe for anyone to grab hold of, right? So it's out there. And that's how some of these companies are getting hacked and they have data breaches. Google was just hacked 2 weeks ago. They did not have a data breach, but one of their servers they had to quickly take offline and go with a backup. A lot of companies right now are not the size of Google, where they don't have a CISO, they don't have, the engineers online to quickly take off a server and then bring back a backup. They're just operating in an infrastructure that they've had for the past 10, 15 years, but now they really have to think about how their employees are engaging with AI because there are folks out there looking for ransom and to shut companies down for weeks on end. Your email, your operations, your technology, your supply chain can be shut down for weeks on end until you pay the ransom. That's all because of AI. So we really have to put in those security protocols and those red roadmaps to keep us safe.
Yeah, it's one of those things like insurance. You're not thinking about it until you actually have the disaster, and then you want to spend the money on it. By then, it's already too late. The damage is done. And
It is.
for cyber incursions, like it can be pretty
Yeah.
costly. That's for sure.
It can. And the folks that are publicly traded companies, they have to divulge that information, right? I think either United Health or one of them was held hostage and they had to pay I don't know how many millions in ransom, right? But some of the private companies, the middle markets, that they do not have to divulge to disclose that information, and they are getting hacked and held hostage as well. Just because I'm in that world because of the advisory work that I do and operations for that startup, and it's affecting a lot of folks' supply chain. So it is like insurance, but it's like, the crazy weather we've been having with floods and everything else around the country. Oh gosh, I should have got that insurance. So something to
Yeah.
look into for a lot of companies.
Well, they say it's not a matter of if, but when you get hacked
Yes.
and how bad the
Yeah.
damage is going to be. And
You said
I
it.
think a lot
Yep.
of legacy software too is wide open. There's a lot of holes in it. So
It is. And that's where we're looking to really patch those holes up, John. So that's a great point. Those legacy systems that have been sitting around for 10, 15 years, they're great, right? But now with AI, things have changed. So we really need to get those buttoned up from protocols. And if you have a phishing, you could tell some phishing campaigns and everything else, it's all over the place now. It's constant. I just had a real life example, actually. A person who I'm working with, she owns a marketing firm, and she was sending an email back and forth and everything else. And me and one of my business partners got an email. It looked like it was from her. The call was her name at her company's name.com. This came over with her signature, her logo, and everything else. It came in just like we were, conversing email, and it said, I'm dealing with a client that needs $1,500, and I'm having a problem with my bank. Can you please, give them the Zelle information for this? And me and my business were like, what? So we looked at it, and it was her name for the email, her business, then at mail.com. And my business partner was sending me a Slack, and he's like, did you see that? I was like, wait, let me look at that. I said, that's not her. I said, that is total phishing and everything else included in a cyber attack from that. So we reported it as spam and phishing, but anyway, it's absolutely crazy. I text my friend who owns a marketing firm, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, that is insane." So I was like, "Just make sure they didn't penetrate your system or whatever." She's a small marketing firm. Crazy.
yeah, I mean, they're getting pretty sophisticated. There's even that new movie that came out. I saw Beekeeper, where old ladies were getting their savings heisted,
Yes.
and Jason Statham had to go in and
Yeah.
clean house. So
I
if they're
saw
making
that.
movies about it, it's pretty widespread. It must be happening a lot.
Yeah.
And anyways, he got the bad guys, but in real life, there's people all over in warehouses just scamming your money and your IP as well. That's another thing, is the IP loss, right? Like
Yeah.
downloading all your internal files, and who knows what they're getting from your company. If you have like a product or something,
True.
next thing
Yep.
you know, next week they have a knockoff in China that they've built, right?
Yeah. Yep. All the different contact information in your CRM and everything else, right? I'm a big fan of Go High Level. I use that one. I know HubSpot's another one. I know Pipedrive, right? So there's a lot of different tools and technologies that, helps us in our operation, but they have to have the right security protocols as well. Make sure they're buttoned up and can't get hacked. So it's really an important time right now for AI and how our employees and customers and clients use it, so that they're not putting us at risk.
Well, and there's a lot of data breaches where companies are getting hacked, and they're getting all their data. Like, I think it was an app just a couple of weeks ago in the news where a couple 100,000 people's IDs and phone numbers and all that was being released, and passwords. And
Yeah.
so it's good to have two-factor authentication, because your password may be leaked not by you but by the
Right.
provider, because
Yeah.
it got stolen from them, and now they have your password. But if you have two-factor authentication, at least they have, like, it'll dial your number and whatnot,
Right.
so that can
Yeah.
be something you can do, at least as a consumer, right?
Yeah. Yep. It's important to set up those protocols for sure. Definitely. And they're all going after banks. They know some of them, and where that company stemmed from is she was working through Accenture at Visa. So she's well aware of those roadmaps to put in place, and then how to implement and execute those roadmaps for security protocols, for those enterprise companies. And those enterprise companies like a Visa or some of the bigger ones that have the dollars and cents for a CISO, a CTO, and a CIO, they're fine for the most part. It's some of the mid-market companies that are into, the tens or maybe hundreds of millions in revenue, that they're on those legacy systems that you mentioned, and they're not thinking of that risk of AI and security. Those really need to take a look at that and go, ooh, how is our population using some of that? Do they have those two-factor authentications in place or not? But there's definitely protocols that they need to put in place.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to some of those mid-sized business owners, and what they're doing in a lot of cases is bringing in like a virtual CISO, like a
Yeah.
fractional,
Yes.
because
Yep.
paying with the salaries now have gone for cybersecurity salaries have gotten insane,
It's
which is
crazy.
great for them if you're
Yeah.
working in this field. But
Right.
but a lot of small businesses just can't afford 3, 4, 5K for a full time, and in
Right.
many cases they don't necessarily need that. But even having a part time or virtual CISO that can help you, I mean,
Yeah.
they're able to help, and it makes a big difference for the business. How has it been for you? And I've seen you've been involved in like M&As and so on. How has that worked when it comes both from the tech side, where you have new tech that you got to either bring in for the new company that's being acquired, or even with the people space from an operational standpoint? Like, how have you seen different things play out from a change management that you have to be involved with?
Yeah, I think it's been a lot of change, John. And I started getting into heavy NAs probably 15 years ago, but then 10 years ago there was a $50 million company when I was in the CPG space. It was food and snacks and beverage and everything else in one of those verticals. And it was a $50 million acquisition. And that was a lot of change management with bringing on that company into our fold and putting it in our systems. And then we had a huge, we doubled the size of our company 10 years ago when I was at a client. It was a CPG, and we bought the Green Giant business from General Mills for $750 million. And me and the CIO, CTO, we had a partner together for implementing our old legacy system and what we needed to do. So we actually implemented Oracle Cloud because we couldn't work with the old legacy system anymore. So that was a huge change management, and rolling out those different trainings and everything else on how to use Oracle, how do we connect on the back end and front end of our customer interface, even, right? So that goes to that and speaks to it. And you have to do those different road shows. You have to develop all the different PowerPoints or presentations, or even creatively put some Loom videos together, right? Use some of those recording technologies, create the video, and then send it out to the population. And nowadays, they have to be 3 to 5 minutes or 2 to 4 minutes, and that's it, putting out little snippets of how to interact with your product. And so it can be a smooth transition. We're really lazy as users and as consumers of how we want to buy things. If it's longer than 3 minutes, or if it's more than 3 or 4 clicks, we're off to the next thing, right? So within that realm, we really have to look at change management and make it appealing towards our customers on how we're going to interact with them and bring them back to buying our products or our services. So had to do a lot of that, kind of infrastructure change management with technology, and then connecting the people to that in order for them to understand, it's not like it used to be. This is a new, you're going to sign in differently. You're going to go to a new web page. We're going to, interact. And that goes through your whole business. It goes through your accounts payable, accounts receivable. It goes through your finance, goes through your sales and your marketing. So all of that has to be tied into change management, and you have to train your people first so they can really relate to your customers in kind of a parallel fashion. So it's a learning journey. It's uncomfortable, and I think a lot of this is change management. It's learning how to be uncomfortable in those situations and getting to a point where we are comfortable a little bit with being uncomfortable, because that's a phrase I use a lot. Say, I know this is uncomfortable, but let's do it together. A lot of people go into, there's three different things I talk about too. It's fight, flight, or freeze, right? And these are neurotransmitters that happen, and we go into a fight, flight, or freeze. Oh, it's a new technology. Either we freeze, or no, I don't want to learn it. I'm going to fight against it, right? Or nope, I don't want any part of it. See you later. And are like, no, let's learn it all together. Let's get together. Let's learn in a group. That's why we have training sessions in group settings. So, we can put together peer to peer group cohorts where we can learn together. And, there's nothing about, I'm scared of new technology too sometimes, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is, a lot of people scared of AI. I don't want to use it. learn our parameters, learn our verticals and what's going to benefit from us. And it's time, right? I want to use my time efficiently and effectively in operations, better our experience from a user perspective to our customers and clients.
Yeah, and I've noticed too, like for large enterprise, like having a subject matter expert, or SME as we like to call it,
Yeah.
for each technology or each platform
Yep.
is helpful, because then you have a go-to person that can kind of be the expert to help lead the discussion and the trainings and so on. Like,
Yep.
you can't be an expert about everything. So, and it also
Right.
gets more engagement from your team, right? If your team members can now be SMEs of different aspects of it, then
Yeah.
they sort of take accountability that, we're all in this together, and this is my part, that we got to get across. I've
Yeah.
seen that because I've been in companies where we brought in, Workday and Oracle. I mean, it was every time it's been a disaster.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
seen Workday integrations take a year, and it's just a
Yep.
nightmare of
Yep.
tech support issues and things not working. I mean, the cost, I can only imagine how much that costs the company in lost productivity, but you wouldn't notice. There's no like billing or anything. It's more of just people not being stuck and frustrated.
Yeah. Well,
But
that
how do you do that now with all the new tech though? Because it seems like, okay, you have an M&A that happens today. It's a lot different than in 2015 or something, where
yeah.
it wasn't as, I mean, I think everybody's tech stack has probably gotten bigger and more convoluted and more less centralized or uniform. Like, for example, before you could have Microsoft Suite, right? Everything's under Microsoft. Now we're seeing a lot of different vendors, and
Yes.
compatibility integration between them not always working, or you have to set up like a Zapier
Yeah.
hook or something to make it work.
Correct. Yep.
So it's like, how are you finding the change management when it comes to all this now compared to like before? It seems just more complex.
It is more complex. And me, as a fractional COO, it's very complex to find out. One of the startups that I was with, we had a vendoring tool called Vendor to manage our vendor management contracts. So even that was a tool that was a startup that was managing all, because it got so crazy from all
Wow.
the tech stacks. When is your contract up for your applicant tracking? When is it up for your analytics platform? When is it up for your ERP? When is it for your Microsoft, whatever platform you're on, right? When is it for your backend HRIS tool? And we're like, oh my gosh, let's look at our tech stack. And this is where I connect with, CFOs and partner with a lot of them and go, let's report on this stuff, because a lot of this is productivity and this is efficiency and effectiveness in operations of your business. So how are we connecting our tech stacks for time, right? And materials and billing and AP, AR, what are we doing with that? And how are we connecting? So looking at your tech stack and narrowing it down for the things that are vital to your business. And this is where you said it earlier, going after that next shiny object. Ooh, I need that tech stack. I need this one. I need that one. And you're like, no, I'm not. We don't need that. Operationally, let's look at it. Let's parking lot that. And I don't like using that term, but let's park it somewhere and we'll revisit it later. Because most times it's the shiny object in the room and it'll come up to the top. But then after a few weeks, yeah, okay, we don't really need it. If it's not improving our efficiency and our effectiveness, and this is what a lot of the work that I do is connecting our people to the technology, to our finance, and to our sales and marketing arm for the betterment of our customers, right? And our clients. So how do we show up in front of them? And if we have all these convoluted tech stacks, that's not streamlined. They're not going to want to use our interface or use our products or our services if they have to jump through hoops. So to your point, we need to connect the dots for them. And that's not always easy if we're getting lost in this world of, let me look at this new technology. Let me go here. Let me go there. And just we have an overwhelming tech stack for people. And then they're like, nope, I found, remember Staples? That was easy. Reordering, right? One button, done, right? Same thing with Amazon, done. Here you go, reorder that. That's the way we've gotten used to interacting with, as a customer consumer with a lot of the products and services that we want. So we have to stay within that vein and that vision.
Yeah, I mean, having the customer at the center of all decisions and their experience, I think, is a key one that we often overlook when we're like, "Oh, that's cool. I want it." I mean, I've done it as well, where I've seen some some tech, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. But then sort of on second thought, the somber second thought of like, it's really
Yeah.
cool, yeah, but it doesn't really make a big difference, or it's going to cost so much that the ROI on that's just not
Right.
worth it.
Yeah.
And I think, from a small business perspective, it's a little easier for us to make those decisions because we're like, hey, we're looking at our P&L and we're like, hey, why add that onto the P&L if it's,
Yeah.
So, but for larger enterprises, I can imagine that can be a little bit more tricky when you have so many moving parts and departments and everyone's kind of wanting something to make their life easier. But really, it's just maybe you just need more staff, maybe you just need a few more people. You're trying to do too much with too little.
Yeah.
And that
You
really
know,
could be it.
I've seen that over the past 2 years where they're moving, a lot of different groups under one person and they're saying, oh, the CLO can own people, chief legal officer can own people. And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Or the CFO can own technology. And I'm like, I don't think so, guys. You're doing two people's roles. I get it for, interim 3, 6 months. Longer than that, you need somebody in that chair to lead that because to your point, that person's not an SME, right? They might understand people, they might understand technology, but they're not a subject matter expert on that. And they're not going to do it well. They're not going to, that's for me as an operator. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work well. Organizational design and effectiveness, that is not enabling people and it's not effective. And this is where I talk to CFOs and I'm like, so you mentioned KPIs and OKRs. How are you reporting on your productivity of your employees, right? So if you're constantly hiring and you're not looking at the ROI, it takes typically 9 months to a year and a half to get people up to speed in a new role till they're creating ROI in your business for that, right? Probably director level and above. Even managers, it could take 6 months to a year to get them in the position, trained efficiently and effective in that role. A lot of CFOs are not looking at those numbers. A lot of CEOs are not looking at those numbers because the CFO doesn't have that on the radar, right? They're just, I'm looking at AP, AR, I got that. I got, accounting, I have month end close, I have all, whether it's manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, whatever. They're not looking at internal customers, which are your employees. How effective are they? And even with some of the different stats that we've seen that have come out, 70% of folks are not engaged. You think they're really producing, I look at it the 80-20 rule. You think they're really productivity looking at 80% for an employee if they're not engaged with an employer? And then you throw in change management and some of these other assimilations to new tech stacks and everything else. They're like, well, this is way too overwhelming. I just need to get my paycheck and get out of here. And that's where they're at.
Well, it's true, and you know what? If you force them back to the office and they're dragging their feet coming into the office because they have to drop their kids off at school in the morning, they
Yeah.
got to prepare dinner at night, they got to pick up their kids, and they're trying to juggle all these things, then way to really help improve employee engagement. And it's like
Yeah. Yep.
those scores. Try doing a survey, with your team and seeing where they're at now, right? Because like
Yeah.
it's the stress level I find in general in society now has gotten to such a high point because of inflation, because of
Yep.
cost of living and everything that
Yep. For sure.
people are mentally not okay since COVID, right?
It's
Well,
true.
first it was because of COVID, and then it was because of inflation. Together,
Right.
it's been a rough 5 years, I'd say, for
It
a lot
has
of
been.
people, right?
It has been. Yep. And everyone's just struggling to make ends meet and pay their bills. So they're really not, up to 80 or 90% productivity wise on, when they go to work. They're very distracted. They are very so health and wellness and mental health is very at the forefront of my mind from an operations perspective. We need to really put in the right parameters and the right technologies to help people focus on their tasks, not just check boxes but focus on what they need to for a great customer experience and internal customer for your employees and external as well. But what makes people go back to work is finding that purpose in that work, finding their potential there. So meaning that it's continuous education, it's learning, it's engaging, right? And then, they have fun, they play, they have that's and if it's not fun and they're just thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm crunched for time to your point, taking my kids to school, picking them up, doing dinner. That's the life we're in. It goes back to how do I get more time back on my calendar?
Yeah. No, I think we'll leave it at that because we can definitely go for a long time with this discussion, right?
We can.
It hits home very much with remote work, with return to office mandates, mental
Yeah, it's
health
crazy.
as in
Yep,
general with everybody. I mean, there's just so
absolutely.
much to this, and
Yeah,
it's funny. One of our guests in the previous call was a mental health specialist, director of clinics. We were talking to a similar type
yeah,
issue, right?
yep.
It's been a rough go for people.
It has, and it's been the past 5 years. It's not just like one or a little slump here. It's been 5 years, I'd say. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming today and a great little talk we had.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it. This is
Yeah,
awesome. Thanks for
thanks.
doing it.